This is a satellite data map of Europe at night. If you look closely, you can still clearly see a sharp divide in light and infrastructure density right down the middle of the continent. While Western Europe shines brightly, the East is noticeably dimmer. The last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, recognized this paradox within his own empire. He stated, "There is plenty of everything: land, oil and gas, other natural riches, and God gave us lots of intelligence and talent, yet we lived much worse than developed countries and kept falling behind them more and more." How does half a continent, armed with limitless resources and the stated goal of building a utopian society, end up economically crippled? It is easy to look at that modern map and assume this lingering poverty is purely the hangover of the Cold War. The 20th century Soviet system was a fatal accelerant. It compounded a much deeper 400-year-old economic trap. To understand the modern baseline, we first have to look at the system imposed after World War II. The Soviet Union absorbed much of Eastern Europe, using the Warsaw Pact to force satellite countries into strict economic integration under the constant threat of military invasion. They operated on what is called a command economy. In this setup, prices and production are not determined by local supply and demand. Instead, bureaucrats sitting in capital cities dictate exactly how supply chains operate, where factories are built, and what specific products they manufacture. In a healthy capitalist market, thousands of businesses constantly compete for consumers. If a company operates inefficiently, it goes bankrupt. That mechanism naturally removes the least productive actors from the economy. Under the Soviet model, the exact opposite happened. If a massive, state-run factory was wasting resources or producing terrible goods, the central government simply subsidized it with more money to ensure arbitrary production quotas were met. We see this macroeconomic rule play out in other regions too. After gaining independence, India adopted parts of this model, taking direct government ownership of vital sectors like coal and steel. Because the government ran everything, internal competition vanished. The command economy mechanically rewarded failure. The less efficient a system was, the more capital the government wasted propping it up, removing the incentive for managers to innovate or lower prices. Leadership ignored these mounting inefficiencies because their priority was ideological optics. They funneled the region's capital into heavy machinery, massive prestige projects, and an arms race with the United States that consumed a massive portion of their national output. This severe misallocation of capital destroyed the daily quality of life. Healthcare degraded, housing construction used shoddy materials, and basic consumer goods became so neglected that ordinary citizens spent hours waiting in the freezing cold just to buy bread. Even within communist countries that experimented with looser, decentralized models, the misallocation of capital created massive internal divides. Take Yugoslavia under Josip Broz Tito. This comparative bar chart shows the economic output within Yugoslavia itself. The Northern Republic of Slovenia spent decades building a productive economy, while the southern region of Kosovo poured money into inefficient vanity projects. Over time, the average person in Slovenia became 8 times richer than someone in Kosovo. Prioritizing ideological posturing over pragmatic market feedback inevitably drains a nation's wealth. It leaves the broader population in poverty to fund the government's vanity projects. The Cold War and its command economies did not create Europe's East-West divide. They merely froze an existing condition in place. To find the root cause, we have to rewind to the 16th century, to a period of massive economic divergence across the continent. During this era, Western Europe began centralizing its political power. This organization paved the way for early urbanization, and eventually the mechanical gears turning in the early Industrial Revolution. Eastern Europe went the opposite direction. They doubled down on an agrarian feudal model known as the Second Serfdom. This system legally chained the workforce to the land, which blocked the development of the mobile labor pool necessary for building urban factories. By locking their entire economy into peasant agriculture for 4 centuries, Eastern European elites created a massive supply chain imbalance. This structural lag doomed the East to function as an agrarian backyard for the industrial West long before Karl Marx was even born. Eventually, the compounding weight of these inefficiencies collapsed the entire Eastern Bloc. Between 1989 and 1991, revolutions swept through the continent. Regimes in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia collapsed in rapid succession. Populations filled city squares, demanding the end of systems that stagnated their lives for decades. But tearing down a system is easier than building a new one. These countries experienced a severe transition shock as they attempted to shift abruptly from a highly subsidized command system to a modern market economy. The moment the new governments stopped artificially subsidizing their failing state businesses, the entire antiquated system collapsed almost overnight. Severe product shortages hit the streets, and governments suddenly faced enormous budget deficits, nearing total bankruptcy. Eastern Europe remains poorer today because they were forced to rebuild their governments and their entire understanding of economics simultaneously. They are still racing to overcome both the scars of the Cold War and 4 centuries of compounding agrarian disadvantages.